I am going to spotlight our presenter, Bobby Bradley. Let me first stream on Facebook here. Always good to log into Facebook.
Don't forget that.
Yes. But this I should have done. I didn't know it was going to log me out. Well, you know what? In the essence of time, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce Bobby, and we will work on the back end to get this going. Mr. Bobby Bradley is our lighting designer today. He is a lighting designer for architecture, live entertainment, and exhibitions based out of Brevard, North Carolina, in western part of the state. He holds a master's in lighting design from the New York School of Interior Design and a BFA in theatrical design from Baylor University, Sikkim Bears. Prior to starting L-Arc, Bobby spent 15 years working in the entertainment industry in New York City for various companies as a lighting designer, project manager, and scenic and projection designer. Selected projects include work for the NYC Fashion Week, trade show design, broadcast TV, off-Broadway theater, large-scale marketing activations, and Expo Dubai 2020. He is passionate about the design of immersive lighting and lighting control experiences to include facades, interactive environments, and public spaces. Bobby also co-founded L+Arc Lighting Design in 2001. So without further ado, Bobby, I'm going to highlight you here. And everyone, thank you for joining. Please mute if you have not done so. Bobby, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks for that great introduction, Michael. I'll start by saying it's only 70 degrees in Appalachia, and I'm very lucky for that. So it's nice. Well, hey, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start a little presentation. I myself, I work as a lighting designer professionally, and I have for a long time. As Michael said, I worked in entertainment initially. So, everything that he listed, I like to call that was my sort of like fun years. It was a lot of work, and we did a lot of lighting that was not DarkSky friendly, but also was only temporary. So I felt really, really good about that. But in the last few years, I went back and got a master's degree and started to pivot to architecture, which actually happened a little bit sooner than that, kind of like pre-COVID, and have moved almost completely now into more traditional architecture design work. And so away from temporary installations. And part of that move was, because I was, get to travel a lot. I love doing night sky photography, long exposure photography. This is a example of I take pictures of blue ghost fireflies that are in my area. I love dark spaces and really trying to capture that and share that with people. And so for my professional career, I've kind of like tried to marry that up with, how can I be more sustainable with my design work? Try to make good decisions, work with owners, educate people, and also just, have a really good, successful design career. And so I started Lark Lighting Design in 2021, just a couple of years ago with a partner in Knoxville. And so that's what one of our missions is to do really good lighting design for architecture, support our clients, but also be very thoughtful because lighting pollution, as you all know, is one of our greatest threats to dark skies. So I'm just going to talk you guys through a couple ideas about what lighting design is, how it works, and then I really want to just get to the point where I can open up for questions and we can have a discussion about, if you're curious about like how it works, how you can get involved, how you can affect change a little bit more specifically, because I'll just tell you the construction industry is dense and it's complicated and the processes are really long. So the timelines that we're working with, we're trying to like make these design decisions can be quite long. So we have to like kind of think years in advance. So I like to start with lighting design though, with anybody I talk to, is why do we even need lighting? As a lighting designer, that's our first question on a project. Generally, these are 5 things that we need lighting for. We as humans, we need to do tasks at night. We need to have safe environments. We need to navigate. We need to make money. Commerce, the Industrial Revolution proved that we could make things at night. We could do manufacturing at night and overnight. We could also enjoy cityscapes and landscapes at night. So there's a beauty aspect to it. You think about parks, playgrounds open at night, baseball stadiums at night. There's a lot of reasons why we need lighting. The challenge that we find is that sometimes it's too much. Sometimes it's for too long. Sometimes it's the wrong quality. So we always ask those questions at the start of a project. What are the goals of the project, and how can we light it intentionally? So there's always like a philosophical background to starting a project. Artificial lighting has actually been around for a long time. Like we think about electric lighting being kind of new, but oil lamps, kerosene lamps have been around for a long time. There's a great, if you're a history nerd, looking at the history of oil lamps and gas lamps throughout European cities is really interesting, because there was a time where people realized that we could be more productive if we had light at night, and that's kind of what enabled us to actually grow as a civilization, is by having light at night. If it's really dark, you're limited to just navigating by the stars and the moon, which is great, but not really great for building construction, or taking care of animals or growing crops, et cetera, et cetera. So electric light also, when it came along, it changed very fast from incandescent to LEDs. Incandescents, we all know, are just beautiful, warm light. For us, taking photographs at night, we know that low pressure sodium vapor, that really kind of ugly orange light is actually really good for, sort of filtering out. But now we've moved into LEDs, and I don't know if you know, but August 1st was Department of Energy had a new kind of rule that went into effect that basically almost any consumer lighting sold at this point is LEDs. So we've jumped the shark. We've moved on. Everything is LEDs. That's the world we live in now. And LEDs are great for a couple of reasons. One, they're really energy efficient. They're great. They save energy, save power, reduce emissions, have longer life. Lots of pros for them. So we've embraced them. The downside is they don't make white light very well. This is for anybody who's familiar with looking at spectral power distribution maps, the way you achieve white light is by combining all the different colors, right? So tungsten halogen, it's warmer light because it's mostly red light, it's burning something. Filtered daylight, it's kind of a full spectrum light, as we call it. It's got all different colors, pure white. No LED really puts a really pure white out. It's always some little chemistry mixture. So part of our job is evaluating that, and it's become a real necessity to have lighting designers when you're talking about a nuanced project that needs to really have an art museum or gallery space where you need to have really good whites. We have to, it's one of the things we have to look at. And then when we think about nighttime lighting, also, we're really sensitive to what quality of color that light is and how we achieve it. So that's just generally, one of the things that we're really interested at the forefront of a project, and is always on the front of our mind. So there's a lot of technical sides to it, but then there's a lot of art to lighting design too. So when we think about what does lighting design mean, lighting design can be outside, inside, site lighting, exterior lighting, facade lighting, your home, and only about 4% of projects. This is a stat I pulled from the AIA architects group. Only about 4% of projects in the US are touched by a lighting designer, a specific lighting designer or consultant hired on that project. The rest of them, at 96%, who's doing the lighting? And that's something that's really interesting to me, is that we need more lighting designers. because I'm a little biased, but I think lighting designers make a project better just because we're asking all these questions and we're like being a little more nuanced in how we approach things. But I think when we talk about light pollution and we talk about, why do some projects have more light pollution than others? Why do some projects, the lights aren't controlled correctly, or they're too blue, or they're too, glary? There's a pretty strong case that's because, lighting designer didn't work on that project. And if only 4% of the projects are worked on by lighting designers, then that's most of them, right? So there's a real challenge we have with educating our clients and people that for projects, even that we're not working on, we want to educate them on good decisions to make, even if they're not going to hire me, because we're a small team. There's not a lot of lighting designers out there, but we want to educate the public. And that's a big part of our job, is to how to make good decisions about lighting, which I know IDA has a lot of good education materials. And so we try to like pull in that as well in our education process. But basically the other people who are making decisions are other designers, architects, sometimes engineers. And I hope there's no engineers on the call because I don't want to offend you, but engineers tend to not really design, but check a box. And it's not derogatory. It's just that like that's the job. And so that's where you get a lot of like sort of cookie cutter or over blue light, just because that's the way they've done it for 20 years. Just cut and paste, push the project out, check it. You get a lot of sales reps, contractors who again, if there's any sales reps or contractors, no offense, but your best interest is to sell more product. And so you're not really interested in like design necessarily. It's just kind of like getting the project done, selling it. And then municipalities, we know a lot of municipalities, like some care about dark skies, some don't. They also tend to just have these like sort of older standards that have been around for a long time and then just kind of get copied and pasted and put through. And they're not really designed. They're just, pushing something through because it's there's not a consultant who really understands the project. So I want to just talk you guys like how I'm just going to like describe anybody who's an architect or in the construction business, you'll understand this process. But for anybody who doesn't know the design process for a lighting designer on a commercial project, I just want to talk you through it just to kind of give you a sense of the scale of the timeline and the complexities that go into it and why we are trying to get as early on a project as we can and how it impacts, how we can affect change in the design each step of the way. Basically, there's 4 phases to every project. We start with an owner early in a project, and we talk about concepts. And from that beginning early day project, that may be like a napkin sketch from an architect, and we just like talk about ideas, to the end of the project when we actually take photos of it. 6 to 24 months is kind of what we see as a typical commercial project, sometimes longer, especially like, with COVID changing the procurement and the supply chains, like kind of making those things longer. But some of these bigger commercials, you think like commercial projects like a baseball stadium, that's many years. So the decisions that we make kind of early in the project are not really played out for many years. So concept. So lighting designer, you hire a lighting designer and you sit with an owner. Let's say this is a project I pulled. This is a gallery. This was a small little project in Atlanta that had a gallery. The gallery is supposed to change over every month, but also had this like dynamic idea to it where they could hold like a party. Their clients were all they're a talent agency, so their clients were like artists and sports guys, stuff like that. So they wanted to like have like a VIP party that could change around. So we, the first meeting we had, we talked about some ideas, and then we pulled some imagery and we said, hey, these are some ideas that we have. Lots of imagery, some sketches. None of this takes very long. It's all very sort of quick and loose, but just to get the idea of how the space is going to feel. The next phase, and we kind of like get some approvals. The next phase is we go into design development, and that's where we say, okay, they've approved these ideas. They like this idea. They want to like this gallery this way. They like these like color changing things. It's great. Now we have to like start to pick out how we're going to do that, and that's where we get into the measurement part of things. So lighting being kind of art and science, the art part kind of happens first, and then we go in and we actually do photometric studies of like how the lighting is going to perform in the space. This is an interior space, small interior space. It's pretty simple. So we can model this all in 3D and like pull the files in and like just check to get that we're, getting what we expect out of the light on the floor or on the wall or wherever. It's not very different from when you go into like a exterior setting, like a parkscape or a parking lot or something like that. You would do the same process. You model the space, draw it out, and then you pull the files in from the manufacturer to actually run the calculations to accurately understand how much light you're getting, and also to not have too much light. So we don't want to spec something that is too little or too much. We kind of want to find the sweet spot of what's actually needed for the space. And as a side note, the way we determine that is there's, an architectural and construction world, there's lots of things that we have to follow, like codes and standards. And so there's a lot of published data out there and recommendations for like what those numbers are. So it gets really kind of engineering-y there for a minute. We try to like balance between art and science and engineering. But I'm definitely not an engineer. I'll tell you that. These images on the bottom and on the right, these are photometric calculations. So it's like, it looks like kind of like a mess of numbers, but those are foot candles at the floor is what it says. So it's like at a point you're getting, 0.4 or 32 or whatever. And then on the bottom images are like renderings out of that same software that show you just, visually kind of like what you can expect in terms of light level and contrast. And then the heat map on the bottom right is just another interpretation of that. So they're all the same thing. They're all the same program. They just can spit out the information in different ways that we can interpret it and communicate that to our clients. So after that process, which kind of takes about half the time, I would say, the rest of the half of the design project is design phase is construction documentation. And this is where like basically, the set of plans that a general contractor is going to go out there and actually install this stuff, buy it, measure it, install it, make sure it works. This is the thing that we develop to give to them, and they just work off our plans along with the engineers and the architects, and like if there's a landscape architect, all those parts of the team, that mechanical engineer, et cetera, et cetera. There's kind of a lot of people on the team that are producing documents. We're just one part that just shows the lighting, but we coordinate with, generally an electrical engineer to make sure that, they've got all their stuff to power basically what we have going on in here. And these are really detailed plans, and this takes a long time because we have to confirm all the light levels we're meeting. If there's any local ordinances for cities that I'm sure you all know about that have local ordinances, if we're doing an exterior project that have exterior lighting requirements, this is where we'd actually run the photometry on the previous slide and deliver that to the city to say, hey, look, your light level requirements are X, or maximum are X, or here's R, they're Y. We'll put this in the document set, and it goes off to be reviewed for essentially a permit application. And this phase can get really detailed on the right, that little slot detail. I mean, there's a lot of like, how does the light fit in the ceiling? How does the drywall connect, like mud in? How does the light actually aim? There's a lot of little details that can go into a project. This is a small one. So you can imagine the scale kind of grows, with in the amount of details and time required with a larger project. And then the last phase, there we go. Last phase, construction administration. I mean, this is the part where basically the contractor is taking our plans and installing it. And so what we do during this phase is we're there just to monitor and check and respond to information during the project. This is a really important part because contractors are great, but if you don't have a great one, your job becomes really important to make sure that they're following all the plans and you can check off on things. So the top two images here on this project, you can see kind of like the galleries under construction. The one on the top right, I love because that's the lighting control system, which just looks bonkers as they were wiring it up. This was a little bit more complicated lighting control system that had like a touch screen that somebody had to program, but the back end of it just looks wild when you're looking at it in the closet. So there's a lot of work that goes into translating just those early concepts of like, oh, we want to make the lights change, whatever, to like getting it in there and coordinating all the different people and the programmers to make sure that they get it right. And the bottom images are the final images of this project. This is one we completed in about a year. It was actually 9 months. It's a very fast project. This is a small project, small renovation. And so it turned out looking great. So another thing during CA or construction administration is looking at lighting products. I don't know if anybody has ever looked at a lighting cut sheet, basically like a product page for a commercial lighting product. They are, you need like a degree in cut sheets basically to understand these. But I think it's important because part of our job is to do is like, if we specify, if I'm doing outdoor lighting and I say, hey, I want a really tight beam because I don't want to like spill lighting up into the neighbor or something like that, or across the property line. I can specify that, but the contractor still has to deliver that. And so what we do is we provide a check during that process before they go approve an order, they have to send us those cut sheets marked with exactly what they're going to buy. And we can go through and check them and redline to make sure. Because, oftentimes it's just because they're complicated projects. They'll miss something on these and they'll get a much wider angle or the wrong accessory or whatever. And that can lead to like problems down the road and lights, going into somebody's windows at night when we didn't want that. And yeah, here's just a couple more pictures. This is that same project on the left from the gallery, kind of another rendered image. And then on the right, this is a project that we completed earlier. It was really small, but it was a pathway. It was a commercial artist residency, pathways that were just lit with downlights. And it was really simple and quiet. It was officially a dark sky project because we had no uplight on the whole project. We put everything down and kind of like strung up lights through the trees to make sure we weren't putting anything, either sideways or upwards. And that's kind of the overview on just the phases. I went through that really fast, but I just want to give you a primer and prompt some questions. The last few slides I have here are just like, how do we control light? Why do we need to control light? Things like that. So, I think this group knows why we need to control light because, mostly we're disrupting the ecosystem. We're also like, for human health reasons, there's a lot of reasons why we don't want certain colors of light at night, maintain our circadian rhythm. But also there's some important things about, crime and safety. There's a big misunderstanding about lighting deterring crime. We're starting to learn that there's research out there that could support it either way. But in general, the misnomer that more light at night means a safer environment has started to fade away in the professional industry, which is great. And then energy consumption, we don't need to have light at night because we're just wasting energy. And the ways we control it are the things that the IDA promotes with direction, CCT, which is color temperature, shielding. Like we all know those kind of rules, so we practice that. But also controls and accountability are two big ones for me. Lighting controls are very smart. And we like smart controls because they can schedule things so that the lighting always goes off at the same time every night. And then you aren't relying on some person, a human, to basically turn it off at night. And accountability is a big one because as a lighting designer, that's our biggest tool in our toolkit, is being on a project and holding everybody on the design team accountable and the contractors accountable for, making sure they follow the design and kind of don't go rogue. And this is kind of a boring spreadsheet that I wanted to kind of almost near the end here, but this is one of our tools. It may look like a boring spreadsheet, but this is one of our tools for holding a contractor accountable, is that we do a lighting sequence of operations in every project. And this is part of their contract is they have to follow this. And so if we say we want the lights to be on, sunset to 2 a.m., they actually are contractually required to do that. And so there's a lot more detail in here, but this is important for us that we've put in our toolkit, is that way when we go back and ask them to change it, they have to change it. They're contractually obligated. We can hold the owner can hold back payment, things like that. So we try to advocate for getting on the project all the way through that process, so we can do that. And yeah, I just wanted to prompt the discussion, like, can we have thoughtful lighting design and also preserve dark skies? Can we do it? Can we have beautiful outdoor spaces? Can we have entertainment? Can we, like, is there thoughtful ways that we can make the night beautiful with light, but then also be able to, like, turn it off, control it, get rid of it when we don't need it? I think that's a question for the lighting industry we've had for a lot of years. It's a constant challenge. But I think we can. I'm a big advocate of I'm working in the entertainment industry for a long time. I'm a big advocate of, like, having beautiful thematic places that we can go to, and also dark sky preserves that we can go to, and making sure that the two can coexist in a way that makes sense, just because we have, like, as humans, we have a lot of ways of enjoying the outdoor environments. And I think it's possible to do both, but it requires a lot of thoughtfulness. And I think, Michael, I may just see if anybody wants to jump into some questions. If not, I can talk about lighting forever. I'd love to hear if anybody has any, like, targeted questions on lighting design.
Man, do we have some questions for you.
Okay.
So first of all, thank you very much for your presentation and your insight into the industry, Bobby, and what goes into designing and planning and all that. That's a whole lot of great information. So we certainly appreciate everything. But these questions will give us, hopefully get some more good information from you. So David Wilson first asked, can you talk about lighting exterior spaces, in particular sporting facilities, whether it be like a stadium or even a recreation center, tennis court or something. Also facades, bridges, monuments adds Nithu. What can you tell us about those spaces?
Yeah, sure. I don't have a lot of experience lighting like large, like, sports, like commercial, like sports arenas or anything like that. I do know that, like, they are a little bit more challenging. The University of Tennessee, I'll use an example, at Knoxville, the UT football stadium was relit several years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago at this point. It's a state school, so it's state. It's a Tennessee owned land essentially, but it's a football stadium that has bright lights. It's a big stadium, and those lights stay on all the time.
Yeah,
it's really unfortunate. It's downtown Knoxville, so it's not, like, totally uncomfortable, except that even when you get out of town, it's definitely the brightest thing.
sure.
And the challenge I do know with that is that largely the decisions on those types of facilities are driven by so many stakeholders. Oftentimes whoever the owner of the property is, which in this case is the state, that the design team has a lot of uphill challenges to really affect change on those. There are standards also that the NCAA publishes, and I think the professional sports as well, but the NCAA one I know that does have, like, minimum light level requirements. So those stadiums, they are bright, but there are standards that they're trying to adhere to, that to pass to get a permit, essentially, or get approval for construction in those areas. I think the uphill challenge I've seen is that getting the controls part of it tuned in, so that when they're not in use, they can go off. It's hard to find exactly the right place to start. I know that's probably disheartening, but it's private facilities are a lot easier to deal with, for sure.
David Barkus asks, have you ever been on a design project that resulted in no or minimal light pollution?
Yeah, the one that I showed you with the path, that's it's the artist residency just outside of Knoxville, and part of our scope and our charge, in the design spec was to have zero light pollution. And
Okay.
so there were some uplights, I will say, on some trees in there, but they were 1 watt or half a watt. They were like these little, your flashlight on your phone puts out more light.
Mhm.
And so they were just like a little accent, but in general it was all down lights on that, and we had a lot of tree mounted lights that were all lighting down. And there was an arborist involved in that project. They were really sensitive about minimally impacting the landscape as well.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just light pollution, but also trying to not dig a lot of trenches, run a lot of conduit and stuff like that. And so we were really happy with that one. As a small project, but
Yeah.
Didn't contribute more light than we needed to.
Okay. Todd Burlett up in Minnesota asks, is there any sort of repository for cut sheets, or do you have to drill down through manufacturer sites and hope they're published online?
That is a great question. The short answer is no. There are people trying to do that. There is a sorcery.com, or I think it's Go Sorcery, is a startup website. I think it's based out of Canada. What they're trying to do is create a database, publicly accessible, where you can go in and there's a free version, and for like more advanced features, there's a like a pay version if you're a professional, but there is a free version where you can access lighting cut sheets and products that are crowdsourced. Basically, it's essentially like user generated, and manufacturers can also have a place on there where they can regularly update. I recommend checking it out. It's not something we use, but I've checked it out, seen it. It seems like a really good idea. The other one I would recommend is Dialux, which is and I can put together a little response, like an email, just like with some links and stuff after this.
Yeah, that'd be great. We appreciate that.
Dialux is a lighting calculation software that is 3D environment, but it's free, and it's European mostly. So if anybody is across the Atlantic, it's going to be a great resource. If you're in the US, it's hit or miss, but it has a lot of pre-populated lighting products from manufacturers. So you can go in there and do exterior lighting calculations. It's really good at that, and renderings, and it's completely free. It's supported by manufacturers, which is wonderful.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Debbie Moran asks, can we move towards projects that do both allow for artistry and more latitude earlier in the evening, but then move to true dark sky after a certain time, even in city centers? Can we have lighting that is truly, good for the aesthetic, but then 100% dark sky after a certain point of the evening?
I hope so. Yes. I mean, that's like as a personal preference. Yes, I would love to see. I mean, I think the challenge is we're seeing urban areas getting brighter, mostly because LEDs are more efficient. So like we've hit a point where like LEDs are, they've been more efficient than incandescents for years, but now they're also getting so efficient that it's cheaper to operate them brighter. So like manufacturers are coming out with new LEDs now they're like, hey, this is lower wattage and it's more lumens. Great, except people are just kind of like swapping them 1-to-1. So a lot of cities that are doing retrofit stuff, they're swapping out. They're getting sold something that is like more efficient, but also ends up being brighter, which is not necessarily what we need. We don't need more light. We just need, like the right amount. So I think the second half of the answer would be like controls is like, anybody who is interested in doing controls, control design, can find a job in the lighting industry right now, because it's so important. And it's so much more technical now. It used to be lights were just controlled by a switch on the wall or a timer.
Yeah.
And now they're all processor based. Basically there's a little computer sitting in every building, and there's not enough people that really like care about that. So it's near and dear to my heart to like care about that on a project, but I only do so many. So
Do you one person asked on that, do you use like it's called DLC's Luna database on fixtures?
yeah, I'm aware of it.
Okay.
I will say just on lighting fixtures, I mean, there is the number of lighting fixtures just in the US is absurd. So there, I think Luna is a good resource, Sorcery. Also every state, I mean, if you're working in the commercial world, that is, every state has sales reps that will have 40 or 50 or sometimes 100 lighting manufacturers that they represent. And that's like a person you can just call and be like, hey, I need a light that does this, X, Y, and Z, is like dark sky friendly, fully shielded, et cetera, et cetera. And they can be that person. It's hard to like navigate it yourself. I will tell you that with like 100% certainty. It's really daunting, So having that person, like a lighting designer, sales rep, somebody like that is like really important.
Do you volunteer to be everybody's rep or point of contact in the future for those purposes?
I have enough information. I have enough knowledge to kind of give some boilerplate answers.
Okay.
I will just say that like it is there's no lighting is not one size fits all anymore. So man, it just depends. Like it's like the worst answer I know, but every project is so different. Some products you can't buy in certain states. Some products, California like has a whole like there's Title 24 restrictions on certain lighting fixtures. Like they have to be labeled that way. So like if anybody in California has any questions, I might not be able to answer them. I don't think I'll Title 24, but I'd be happy to be a resource, at least in pointing the right direction, because it is a lot of stuff to wade through.
Yeah, no doubt. We appreciate that. Nick Knorr asks, what is the role of IES standards in lighting design and lighting generally? Are they looked at and are they followed?
Good question. The short answer is yes. I have a book down here that's like this massive book, which is the old IES lighting handbook. Now it's all online, but we referenced it on every project. So every project when we at least we do, and all lighting designers and lighting engineers that I know, or electrical engineers, you basically, when you start a project, you look at what the space type is. You say it's an office, it's a museum. You go to the IES handbook, and it will have sections and recommendations for those different spaces of like what your light level targets are for a lot of different cases. And it's important because when we run the calculations, those are what we reference. Now the catch is those are recommendations. It's not a code.
Sure.
There's no lighting code for like what minimum, except for like some ADA, and egress stuff. But in general, they're recommendations, and sometimes they're too high. The IES in the last few years has dropped their parking lot lighting minimums down, which is great news. It used to be like 1 foot candle. Now it's down to about a half.
Okay.
And that's great because for all those folks who aren't really like, trying to be like super creative and are just following IES standards to the letter, that means that they're dropping their levels down, which is ultimately a good thing for us in the who care about dark skies and for also energy efficiency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Stephen Miller asks, do you equip the eco quote unquote aspect of your work in your marketing or your brand? Do you attract clients that are looking to do dark sky friendly projects, or is that more of something that you try to approach when after the fact?
It's a good question. I mean, marketing. So my target clients and our marketing scheme is more. It's not really public facing. It's more it's more business to business. Like it's going to architects and designers, and those types of groups. And so it's not like something we are actively marketing, but it is something we are actively talking about when we discuss a project, especially an exterior project. I have had owners though, I'll tell you this, I mean, it's like not a badge of honor, but who, they want this building lit up like Disney, or they want it lit up like Times Square outside. And I'll tell you, it's hard because if the owners contracted you to light this building and that's what they want, it's a it's a challenge.
Money
So
talks.
yeah, I don't, it's not great, but what we try to do is say, okay, well, we're going to do our best. We're also going to be really thoughtful and design the controls and be specific and do the best we can. Because if we don't do it, somebody else is going to design it. It's the owner, the person with the money. They're going to get what they want,
Yes.
one way or another. So I think it's a little challenging sometimes, but and my business partner and I had some discussions about one project in particular, which I won't mention, but they've had us put so much uplight on it, so they should blast this facade. I'm like worried about the birds. I'm like, oh, God, migrating birds. I'm like, I'm just like, I can't sleep at night, but I have to like say, okay, we're just going to do the best we can, get the controls right, just do the best we can, to like really mitigate it as much as possible.
Okay. Dan Oakley in Missouri asks, what metrics from a DarkSky place would you need to reduce or assess the impact of residual impacts? He says you can have compliant lighting according to industry guidance, but the landscape impacts are often seen as secondary impacts. So how should lighting designers and DarkSky places improve on the guidance that may have to limit good lighting in dark places? What are those thresholds?
It's a good question. It's a lot of nuance in that. Generally the way it has to be measurable in general, either by quantity or time, I guess, is a good way to answer it. And maybe based on location, like if you're there's, I don't know if you know about like turtle friendly lighting in Florida.
Okay.
There's a whole bunch of lighting manufacturers that have produced lines of lighting within their lines that are certified or something to that effect to be turtle friendly. And that's one part of it, but and that's like the color of the light, the shielding, etc. But also the other part of that is turning it off during specific hatching seasons and nesting seasons. So I think it's a case-by-case basis, just based on the environment. And it's really hard. I don't think there's like a rule of thumb other than when you first start a project, evaluating with the owner and the stakeholders of what are like, how sensitive are we being to the environment?
Sure.
And how sensitive are they? Like what's important to them? They drive the project generally, the owners, the architects. We're supporting, but we can ask those questions. And that's one of the things we try to do is get in front of it. And if they've not thought about it, then we can at least prompt it and really educate them, maybe they, kind of go from there.
Are those owners typically, do they receive that kind of response well, when you bring up dark skies and, good responsible outdoor lighting? Do most people who run these projects say, oh, I didn't consider that, like, please tell us more? Or is the response, we don't care about that?
It's a good question. I mean, just in my experience, my limited experience. It more so positively than not. Sure. I had one client who wanted to put a light that you could see from space. He wanted to like recreate the memorial, the tower memorial light in like rural Tennessee. And I kind of just I was like, I can't work on this project.
Yeah.
So we just declined that project. We moved on, and it was kind of hard because we were like starting the business, and it was like, sure, we can't say no to work. But that was one in particular instance where the owner was not going to budge. No amount of educating was going to happen, and we just walked away from it. And I suspect that's going to be like a pretty rare case. Though most clients have been really receptive and really interested.
Do you know if that light ever was made?
I hope not. Gosh, I hope not.
Yeah, I think we're all hoping.
Yeah.
Leanne asks, how can we convince a big company that they don't need to follow these old codes for required luminosity? They want to cite a bunch of codes, but how do we get these big designers or these architects, engineers to move to progress in this line of thinking, to have new codes, I suppose.
Right. I mean, based on just a recent experience, we were doing a project in on some Cherokee land, and so it was a historical like burial ground area. The engineer hired on that project, the electrical engineer, wanted to just put whatever parking lot lighting that they've always done on every project, which would have been like a McDonald's or something. It was like, but this was like a, like a burial ground, like Cherokee, like sacred land.
Yeah.
And it was an uphill battle to try and get them like feed all the information from even just the IES standards to say, look, they were proposing 4,000 Kelvin, and really high levels, like 5-foot candles or something. And I think our best tool was using the IES standards because, like I said, they've lowered them so much. But we could send them the IES standards, which for exterior specifically are generally correlated to like what lighting zone you're in. Like if you're in like an urban area versus a dark, sort of like dark preserve, those levels shift. And so we could use that and like use a light pollution map. And I think we even sent DarkSky material to say, look, everything is pointing you that like this is the direction you need to go.
Yeah.
And then get the owner's buy-in, because ultimately the person signing the checks and the person like signing the contracts, if you can get their buy-in,
yeah,
that'll trickle down eventually. And at least on that project, that seems to have worked, in that everybody kind of like ganged up and said, no, this is not happening.
Yeah.
And that we're going to follow this, at least follow the standards, and not go higher than that.
Great. Let's see here. Keep scrolling. Are you, David asks again, are you the responsible function for performing ROI on the use of smart systems? Who does this or is capable of doing that to determine, return on investment on those things? Like
an upgrade or like a transition from an old system to a new system.
Yeah.
I don't, not me personally, and we've not really gotten into that. I think a larger lighting design firm, we're a small firm of like 5 people right now. And so there's a couple larger ones that could perform those calculations if they're contracted to do it. It's sometimes like engineers, I think, or sales reps that would generally kind of do that kind of thing.
Sure.
And honestly, like, I've only been doing the architecture thing like full in this world for like a handful of years now, 5 years maybe.
Yeah.
Everything has been shifted over to LED in the most part. That it seems a little bit rare that those types of projects come up. Like maybe 8-10 years ago, when there was like LEDs finally became, more efficient and cheap enough to do big retrofits, there was kind of that ROI discussion. I've seen less of that these days because so many, all new construction is already LED. So the efficiency you gain out of a new system is minimal, in general. That's just my experience, though. The larger, office parks or big retail areas, they may engage somebody specifically to do that, but it probably wouldn't be me.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
We do have a comment or a question from Facebook. They ask, are there any recommended books that are useful for interior and exterior lighting design?
Yeah, I don't have any off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to put a few links in as a follow-up and put them on Slack. And there's definitely a lot of good resources out there. I would not recommend the IES handbook. That'll put you to sleep. But there is one book I can say, it's called Brilliant, and it's kind of a personal like first person sort of narrative about encountering lighting, and it's curious and interesting and like a fun read that you don't have to know anything about lighting in general. So
cool. Dan asks, what fraction of that you may be aware of IES members and or designers in the industry are aware of dark sky concerns? Do you feel like it's fairly widespread, or do you think it's still kind of a niche concern for the design industry?
I couldn't give a number, but just my sense. Well, I'd say there's two groups. There's IES, which is a very large group. There's lighting designers, engineers, sales people. The IES kind of encompasses it's a pretty big tent. There's another group called the IALD, which is the International Association of Lighting Designers, which I'm also a member of that. That's a smaller group, but that's just lighting designers, and they are very concerned about light pollution and dark skies. And I think it's because generally if you're a lighting design professional, you're trying to be thoughtful anyway. And they have a pretty good sense of their programming, and their resources and their conferences are generally designed around artistry, thoughtfulness, being eco-friendly, being sustainable. And so the sort of light, limiting light pollution, all just these days it just tags along. You can't have really a conversation about anything sustainable without talking about light pollution. And I think the IES does a good job too, based on I'm not as engaged with them, but I do see them, they're like newsletters and webinars. There's generally some stuff that pops up, and it's pretty common.
Okay, cool. Caitlin Johnson in Minnesota, she asked, what are some of the barriers to getting proper controls installed? Is it an economical thing? Is it, what could that be? Any resistance to that?
Such a good question. There's a lot of barriers. I think one barrier is cost, because switch on the wall landscape timer is definitely cheaper than a smart controller of any kind, especially anything commercially installed. I think the biggest challenge is getting programmers, people who know how to program those systems and can do it sensitively. A contractor, it's less about the what and more about the who. Contractors who are installing all this stuff in commercial areas, they're paid to install the stuff and make sure it works and turn it on. They're not thinking about all the nuance of day to night and circadian rhythm and dark skies and whatever. Some of them are. If you get one, you're super lucky, but it's pretty rare. So and then that kind of cascades, since they lead the charge on the construction aspect. All the people under them, the programmers, who are kind of the last people in the room, they may just not get the information, and so they may just show up, do whatever they did in the last project, and get out. And so if you ever see the lights on at night in an office, you don't know why. It's you don't know why. Nobody knows why. Programming, it didn't know why either. He just showed up and had to do his job and check a box so that they could get paid on that project. So having smart people who care about it throughout the process, or educating those people, I think is really important. It's challenging though. 100%.
Yeah. You have to approach it delicately, because you don't want it to make it seem like you're attacking their ignorance or anything like that. It's
having a really thought out plan, even if you're home, if you go to somebody who's a Lutron, or somebody locally, and they're going to install Lutron system, just being really specific. Those types of guys and gals love specificity. It's I want this to do this at this time, at this much, this time, this much. Spreadsheets, they understand it. So those are specificity is definitely important at that, when you get to that granular.
Okay, we have a few more minutes left. I'm just gonna wrap it up with one more from Deanne. Everybody else, I know you have so many more questions for Bobby. I apologize, we don't have enough time. Like he said, he could talk about lighting design all day long. We could probably ask him about lighting design all day long. So, but in respect for everybody's time today, Bobby, can we share your email address for all the folks to ask you follow-up questions, maybe more technical questions before we wrap it up?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we'll put that out
Cool.
in the email for the recordings that we send out tomorrow for this session and session number 2, inviting people to reach out to you. But one last question from Deanne. Can you confirm in your work that just shielding and zero uplight alone is not enough to solve or to fix light pollution? That it's recognizing that we have to implement all 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting, that we can't really parcel each individual one to say, we at least checked one box.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think control is and smart controls, which smart controls is maybe not the right word, but you know, generally that's what people call it, is I think that almost the number one way to do it. You need all those parts, but I think if you think about it, there's a lot of reflected light that happens off the ground. So if you have like a really light ground plane, even if you have a shielded light going down, I mean, that if 50% of the light's going back up,
right?
It's helping, but it's not solving. And so lighting is only in the present, which is kind of beautiful. And so like it's the easiest thing to do is just turn it off and control it on a schedule. And I think, you know, if you follow all the other tenets, obviously you're moving in the right direction. But it's you know, I think the 5 principles is like is like the perfect thing, because it's just it's never one thing. But time, I think, is always the biggest factor to me.
Sure.
In general.
Well, Bobby, we appreciate your time today, man. Thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, we will be meeting with Bobby again here in several hours. So if you didn't have your question answered in this session, come back with it here a little bit later. But again, we will include his email in the records email for tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. You can watch this session and the second session when we send that out. Just to tease, next month's September Advocate Action meeting, we'll be doing a storytelling workshop regarding dark sky conservation and covering what is known as the quote unquote ABT method. So if you know anything about that or want to learn more about it, I would say go check that out online before coming. But we're going to learn how to tell stories, tell our story about dark sky awareness and conservation. So thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, Bobby, for joining us today. And we will talk to you all very soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.